Hello, I'm Betsy Bennett. I am working with Jane Ellen as co-facilitator of Third Act Faith and delighted to be doing so. I'm traveling today. I hope to join you, maybe to already be on the call when you see this, but I couldn't rely on a good internet connection or on getting where I'm going in time. So we decided it was best to record this. I'm here to invite you into a short time of reflection, and I'm using something from the United Nations Environmental Sabbath Service. This reflection I'm going to read is a reminder that the earth needs some Sabbath renewal from harmful human activities, and also that we who work for the repair and renewal of our planet and our democracy need times of rest as well, times to simply be and to remember who we are. Let us begin. We who have lost our sense and our senses, our touch, our smell, our vision of who we are. We who frantically force and press all things without rest for body or spirit, hurting our earth and injuring ourselves, we call a halt. We want to rest. We need to rest and allow the earth to rest. We need to reflect and to rediscover the mystery that lives in us, that is the ground of every unique expression of life, the source of the fascination that calls all things to communion. We declare a Sabbath, a space of quiet, for simply being and letting be, for recovering the great forgotten truths, for learning how to live again.
May it be so. I am pleased to introduce now Dan Terpstra, who is on our coordinating committee. Some of you have met Dan on some of our other calls. He was one of the folks who helped get this group started. He is going to interview a friend of his, an earth leader and pastor and scholar. So Dan, I'm going to let you introduce Trisha and take it from here.
Thanks, Jane. Jane Ellen. As Jane Ellen mentioned, I'm Dan Terpstra, and I'm following in the tradition of Pat Elmenrod and Fletcher Harper from Green Faith, who a couple of our general meetings ago had an interview with each other. And tonight I've got the pleasure and the opportunity to spend a little while interviewing Trisha Tull. And I wanted to start with Trisha's bio, because that's what you do, right? You got to have a bio. So I was poking around on the web today trying to find a good representative copy of Trisha's bio. And here's what I came up with. I'm going to read it to you. Trish might recognize these words. The Reverend Dr. Patricia K. Tull is A.B. Rhodes Professor Emerita of Hebrew Bible at Louisville Seminary in Kentucky. In that life, she specialized in the biblical prophet Isaiah. She has devoted her post-academic life to environmental theology and creation care. Trisha is a climate reality presenter, a Green Faith Fellow, a former program director for Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, and a certified permaculture designer. She lectures, preaches, and leads workshops helping congregations to seek effective ways to address climate change. She and her spouse, the Reverend Don Summerfield, live in a net zero energy home in Henryville, Indiana, where they enjoy growing much of their own food and hosting the key people who inspire their actions and advocacy against climate change. 6 children, 5 children-in-law, 7 grandkids, and several adopted offspring, as well as friends and church members. I was also one of the people that Trisha has been trying to host for several years now, but it seems like every time we arrange something, something else gets in the way and prevents that from happening. Trisha and I first crossed paths probably, well, it was just about exactly 10 years ago, I think, Trish. It was when I was trying to get Presbyterian church leaders involved in fossil-free PCUSA, the divestment movement within the Presbyterian Church. And you were getting ready to publish your book, Inhabiting Eden, and needed people to read it. So you asked me to read your book, and I did, and I never could get you to join Fossil-Free PCUSA. But that was a dozen years ago. And it's been a delight of mine to be able, over the years, to intersect with you on numerous occasions and have an opportunity to call you a friend. And I do appreciate that. So welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
So one of the things that I think is of great interest is how did you go from studying Isaiah to being concerned about creation care and climate and environmental justice issues? So what caused that transition to occur?
Well, so I've told you about this before, and this may be the case for some other people on this call, and I hope a lot of people around the world. When I went in 2006, the movie An Inconvenient Truth came out. And I went to see it in the theater, and I don't know what happened to everybody else who was in the theater, but it spoke to me in a way that I think I had heard about climate change before, but it spoke to me with a great deal of urgency in a way that I had not heard before. And my father was a scientist, and so I was, well grounded in respect for science, if not understanding of it. And so I thought, if the scientists are saying this, then we should all have our pants on fire and all be doing something about this. And I was, at that moment, it was a pretty opportune time. I was already a full professor. Children had just finished college. So it was kind of a break point anyway. And so the biggest problem at first was trying to figure out, what dealing with climate, dealing with environmental problems that we had in general had to do with anything that I was skilled at, anything that I knew. And it took a little fumbling around. I had the sense that if this problem is as big as it is, then all are called who are going to hear the call. And all of us have a lot to contribute if we are able to dig down and find it. And I think the thing that was, particularly on my mind was thinking about what kind of role religious leaders have. And E.O. Wilson talks about that some in his little book, The Creation. He talks about how scientists can tell what's going on in the world, but it's people of faith and people of goodwill and good conviction who are the ones who can talk about what we should do with that information. that scientists are giving us. And so I saw you all, the religious world in general, as a source of possible inspiration. Although at the time I didn't really know anybody else who was in the position that I was in. So I started digging down into, what as a scholar and as a Presbyterian minister I had to offer, and began to make some discoveries that about ancient scripture that I actually found helpful. And I'd already been through, the frustration of recognizing that on some matters, scripture is not that helpful, that we're having to kind of talk back to scripture in some ways. But I found that they did not share our assumptions about our separation from nature. The ancient people, not only of the Old Testament, but of the heritage of Christianity and Judaism, but religions around the world that came from ancient times, recognize that we are embedded in the world. We need creation. We're dependent on it, and we're not separate from it. So as I think you all know, as people of faith, there's a great deal in ancient scriptures around the world to address that. So I got to work on, what kinds of things can I do as a religious scholar, as a teacher, and as a pastor and preacher, and then very quickly got around to what to do in my local congregation, what to do in my home and with my family. So that's where it came from.
So in 6 years, you went from discovering Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth to publishing a book called Inhabiting Eden that basically dealt with all of us and our role in creation. And what have you done? What have you done since then? Where has your scholarship taken you in the decade since the publication of Inhabiting Eden?
Well, I've written a lot of articles and on various levels, for scholars, for church leaders, and so on. But I think the big thing right now is that I'm writing the Horizons Bible Study for 2024-25 on environmental justice. And I found that as a wonderful opportunity to get to know that particular extremely important aspect of environmental issues. And that is now has gone through 2 drafts and is going to be coming out next year through through Presbyterian Women, the PCUSA. So that's what I've been working on lately.
You've also been involved in a group, I think, called Presbyterian Climate Activists or Climate Action, something like that. Advocates.
Presbyterian. Yeah, that was some friends of mine in various churches in Southern Indiana who were involved in Citizens Climate Lobby and wanted to offer classes that got Presbyterians and more deeply involved in climate work in their homes, in their churches, and in advocacy with their political leaders and their communities. So we offered that class about 7 or 8 times over the course of a couple of years, and it was a lot of fun getting to work with them. This was our pandemic activity.
So one of the things that Bill McKibben often says, and I've heard it from a number of other climate advocates, when people ask, what can I do? What can I do as an individual? Bill's response is often, stop acting like an individual. And I'm wondering, for you, what was your climate journey once, besides the academics, what did you do personally to act out that response to climate and climate change and your concern for your carbon footprint? just both in your home in Jeffersonville in the early days and with your church, and where you find yourself living these days.
We started at home. We lived in a 100-year-old house in downtown Jeffersonville, Indiana, about a block away from the Ohio River. And it was an old and leaky 4-square colonial house. We just got to work. We had an energy audit. We did all the things that, and I'm sure that everybody on this call has done, or at least thought to do. We had an energy audit. We started tightening up the house. We plugged up the leaks and got more insulation. We weren't able to use solar panels because we had too much shade. Not a terrible thing to have. It meant that we didn't use air conditioning much at all there. But we were able over the course of 5 years to reduce our use of both electricity and gas by about 2/3. And at that time, we were hearing about, it was the Obama era, and we were hearing about the need to, the desire to reduce the emissions from our electric grid over the course of many more years than that. And, looking at what we had done, I thought, well, why is that so hard? Why can't we just do that? At church, I was a minister's wife. My husband, Don, was pastor. So I was trying to figure out how to tread lightly and at the same time do something effective. And I was teaching a Sunday school class, and somebody asked, what are we doing for Earth Day? And so I asked Don, what are you doing for Earth Day? And he said, why don't you preach? So I preached this sermon for Earth Day that was so effective that nobody talked to me about it for a whole year. And then a whole year later, somebody who knew, had paid attention, I guess, knew that I was interested, said, we really ought to be recycling here. So I kind of grabbed her arm and started a committee, and we started recycling, and then we just, our work grew and grew until finally we were able to put 2 rounds of solar panels on the church building after some energy conservation improvements. So it was an interesting journey, because it was a very purple, middle of the road church that began to identify itself as we're the green church. And they actually became the first Presbyterian, what are those called? The Earth Care congregation in Indiana. So we had fun with that, and we're no longer there. My husband's taken a halftime call in a town called Scottsburg, Indiana, about 30 miles up the road. So it gave us the opportunity to move and build a house on land that we had in Henryville, Indiana. And we decided that we would just take the plunge and build a house that was so energy efficient and equipped with solar panels, so that we would be able to experiment with what it would be like to have an all electric net zero emissions home. So we moved into that 4 years ago. And since then we've been, it's given the opportunity to have an actual model to show other people that this is what we're aiming for when we talk about electrifying everything. To have an energy efficient home doesn't necessarily mean that it looks a lot different from other homes. It's just that it functions differently than other houses. So that's what we did, and alongside of that, we had developed a lot of other habits that I'm sure a lot of people on this call have. We're growing a lot of our own food, as you mentioned earlier, Dan, and trying to eat as low on the food chain as we can, save, not waste plastic, not waste food, and build a wildlife habitat for all of our four-footed and other-footed neighbors in the surrounding area. So yeah, we have fun.
So what kinds of roadblocks did you run into when you were trying to get a net zero carbon footprint home in southern Indiana?
Oh, well, we actually were quite fortunate. We found a designer who lives out in Washington State, who's actually a home builder himself. And he has a website called Zero Energy Plans. And so I worked with the designer to figure out the house. And in the meantime, we found a builder who was an award-winning builder here in Indiana in terms of energy efficiency. And so we got on a number of Zoom calls between the two of them, working out how the house would work with a compromise between the optimum ideas that the designer had and the realities of materials and workmanship that were available in southern Indiana. And our biggest issue was with the HVAC people and trying to figure out. They were equipped to do geothermal and inflow radiant heat, and to make it all energy efficient with heat pumps. But we had some differences about exactly how that was going to work. But we worked it out, and we're pleased with the result.
So where do you go from here? You've got the net zero home, you've got the electric car, you're still thinking about climate change and the church and how those fit together. You're still writing curricula. What are you thinking about how the church needs to respond through even things like third act faith say? How do we as a faith community respond to climate change? What directions do we go in?
Well, I think I'd have to follow the example of Catherine Hayhoe in saying that the most important thing we can do is talk about it. We can act, we can do all these things, we can show by example a lot of things, but to communicate our concern with other people is people we run in, people we know, who can find, who will then begin to use us as resources because they know that we are involved. But even more, people we don't know, our legislators, and chance meetings on the street. And those of you who have EVs and travel with them may have had this experience. I cannot go on a trip without running into somebody in the Walmart parking lot at the Electrify America stations who want to talk about EVs and what is it like to have EVs. And so I've had a number of conversations like that, and finding ways to say, yeah, it's a cool car. I enjoy driving it. I like the slower pace that driving an EV necessitates, and I'm driving it because, I'm sorry, I'm plugging my phone in. I'm driving it because I'm concerned about climate change, and that may not be your thing, but it is my thing. And more often than not these days, I'm finding that people are saying, oh yes, I'm hearing about that, and I care. And maybe even sometimes asking, maybe not outright asking, what can I do, but beginning to reflect on what their contribution might be. So, I go back and forth. probably many people do, between being really worried about what the future holds, between that and being very excited about the future that may be unfolding before us for our children and grandchildren. Not only a world where we've actually grappled with something this large and begun to pull ourselves back from the brink, but also that we've begun to create a world in which we belong as plain members of creation, a world where we appreciate more thankfully what is all around us, the relationship that we have with the larger than human world. I'm hoping that that's going to be a much more rejuvenating world that we're going to be living into. I wish that I were young enough to be able to experience it, but there we are, 60 and older people. We're going to be handing this over to some people who are coming after us.
That sounds to me like an excellent point at which to wrap this up. I look forward to one day sitting around your kitchen table in Henryville and going deeper with this conversation over some homegrown veggies. So at some point in the future, we'll make that happen. And I look forward to that.
You all are. So I hope to see you all on my doorstep. And I'm Day. And Dan, thank you so much for your good questions and your kindness and talking to me about this all. You mentioned at the beginning that this was inspired by a conversation between Pat and Fletcher, but I want to also emphasize that they're very big people, and I'm like you, just an ordinary person. And I'm hoping, and we have talked about this a little bit, I'm hoping that this conversation might be only the start of people among us in Third Act Faith getting to know one another and interviewing one another successively so that we will know who one another are and how we join forces, how we make common cause with each other. So thank you all for listening to us.
We had speculated at one point that it might be an interesting approach to allow the interviewee to pick the next interviewee and do this as an ongoing series. So maybe we can explore that. So we'll see where that goes. I think at this point, we're going to go to breakout rooms. Isn't that right, Jane Ellen? Okay. And we have a prompt for the breakout rooms. Are we going to share that now, or are we going to wait until we go into the rooms?
I have put that in the chat. We want to continue this conversation and really wanted this meeting to be about building community and getting to know each other. So our prompt is pretty simple. How did you become passionate about climate change and/or democracy? And what part did your religious or spiritual life play in that? It's in the chat now, so you might want to copy that. We do have a slide as well. Pat, do we want to put that up, or we're probably going to lose it when we go into breakout? So, and our thanks to Pat, who's been mentioned several times, our one of our recent co-facilitators and the other one who got this group going, and he is running tech for us tonight. So
I am doing my best. Thanks, Jane Ellen. I'm sorry I forgot to turn on the recording as early as I should have, but we got part of Betsy's reflection there, and I think we can, since we've got that recorded already, we can add that on.
yeah,
so we can catch the whole thing. Yeah, I will put up the slide because as Melanie and Jeff pointed out, we don't see the prompt.
There we go.
There it is. There it is.
There you go. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to create the breakout rooms. We'll have 4 rooms with 6 each, or we've shrunk a little bit. So let's do.
And we'll have 15 minutes. So it's just the one prompt, and we just really want you to chat with each other and get to know each other through through this lens and the wonderful conversation that Dan and Trisha modeled.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I know some folks have dropped off. We do want to move along. We were shooting for an hour, may go a little bit over, but we want to just offer a brief sharing, maybe not what was said, but just sort of maybe what the experience was like of being able to share this with others. And I'm going to introduce Mary Jane Cherry, who is the editor of our fabulous Substack newsletter, which hopefully all of you get. She's a member of our coordinating committee, and she's going to lead us through a little bit of sharing before we share some news with you.
Hello, everybody. And I think rather than picking out group 1, 2, or 3, I just ask someone representing each of your groups if you would just kind of, I guess, tell us a little bit about what you learned about how people, what brought them to this work, and how their faith intersects with that. So is there a group that would like to begin by sharing what they found from their personal stories?
I'll just say that in my group, I think I was in group 4, what seemed to be the theme is loving nature as young children, and having that connection. And then many found spirituality, like, are more of a set spirituality later.
Other,
by contrast, and say that in our group, it was key figures in our lives and books, particularly theological books.
Interesting.
So I can share for our group. Mary Jane was in that one as well. Like Nancy, we also all went back to our childhood as a reason why we were interested in climate change work. And for me personally, the affinity that I felt within the group amongst these 3 people was a real powerful thing. And so we need to do breakouts at every meeting.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
FYI.
Yeah.
Well, I will promise right now that the next time I have to do the breakouts, I will do it better. So
We all have to learn one way or another.
With group 2, this is interesting that the groups fell into these patterns. Ours was influenced by key figures, but they were outside of the theological world. 1 Bill McKibben, 2 Al Gore's, and 1 circumstantial. And then 1, I think, just was born that way, born interested in climate.
what were some of the books that were influencing you? Yes, I think 1 or 2 of you mentioned that. What were some of the sources that were inspiring to you that you might share with all of us?
End of Nature.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine Hayhoe's Saving Us.
Any Edward Abbey book.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie Strand, anything by Sophie Strand. We actually started doing that at the end of our breakout. I just put a note in the chat that maybe we should facilitate a sharing of all of the books that have been inspiring to us, because there are a lot.
Yeah. And we're thinking about having a book discussion group formed at some point. So this will be very useful. And I have to give a plug, Deborah, for your book too, on Refuge. Yeah, that's very, very moving, very moving. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Jim Antell's book, Climate Church, Climate World.
Yes. Trisha, you actually spoke at our church about 4 or 5 years ago at Beargrass Christian in Louisville.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. And it was because one of our Green Chalice people had read your book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that he recommended that we have you to come speak.
That's been a really fun thing, is being able to go around and meet people from very different congregations all over the country. It's really inspiring
Yes.
to do that.
Well, I ended up in a room with just me and Sharon, and we had a wonderful conversation, but I don't think we really followed the rules too well. We kind of meandered around, but inconvenient truth was definitely a theme. I hear that all the time from people, but that's how she really got engaged and felt like she had to do something about it, you know. So yeah, otherwise we had a wonderful chat.
You know, all this talk about books reminds me, we have from the start talked about, within this group, talked about using our webpage as a repository of resources like books and films and, you know, whatever else we can think of. It has bedeviled Dan and me, especially from the start, that we don't have control over our webpage on the website. But that we are told time and time again, and I'm still believing them. We are told by Third Act Central that that's coming, the ability to do that sort of thing. So keep gathering your ideas, keep you know, prompting us with information like that, and we will eventually be able to do that.
I'm glad someone still has hope, Pat. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
No,
know.
it's happening. It's really happening. June 7th, you're going to hear all about it on the
Yay.
branding call.
Once you get there, I've got a website that can fill up a lot of pages of resources for you if you need it, that I've done for our Sufi community. Also, I posted something earlier on the chat that I would love to have as a subject for another meeting, which is the issue of privilege and the fact that the things we're talking about require a pretty good amount of privilege to be able to buy an electric car and build your house and all that kind of stuff. I think it would be interesting to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, I saw that. That comment, and I'm glad you brought it back up again, because that is a really important thing to talk about. How do we influence people who are privileged as we are? How do we also call attention to the fact that everyone is not living a life of privilege, and most people are not in this world and even in this country.
And what would our responsibility be to lift that part of the world up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Which is kind of what Third Act's all about.
Yeah.
I'm just a little confused about the day we're meeting today, because I thought that we were meeting once a month, like on the second Tuesday or something like that.
But that's the coordinating committee.
Okay.
So for those of you who didn't know, we have a group. We did a little bit of this in the last meeting, if you were with us, just, I think back in January. And some of the people have changed, but we, Third Act is the large national organization. We are one of the working groups. We are an affinity group as opposed to a regional one. I know some of you are involved in those as well. We're guided by two co-facilitators, which right now is Betsy and me, and a team of 12 to 15 folks who make up our coordinating committee. So a number of them are on the call. Some of them have had to slip off, but we are always looking for ways to involve our members. And so I think maybe this is a good time to pass it to Pat. I know we were hoping to end by 9, but we may go a little over, but we do want to share some opportunities to get engaged with some of the initiatives from Third Act Central, and then some of the specific opportunities in Third Act Faith. So
just to clarify about the meeting, then how often does this whole group meet, and is that a regular thing?
That is not regular. We are hoping to meet more often.
Okay,
That's one of the
good.
things-
Thank
that's
you.
one of the committees that we're forming will be a group that plans and schedules these. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you.
Excellent segue, Jane Ellen. I am trying to share a PowerPoint now. Do you all see third act campaign clusters at
Yep.
the top?
Yes.
Okay. This is the new scheme that's being rolled out by Third Act Central. We are going to be working on campaigns for this year and next year around these three themes: fossil-free finance, democratizing energy, and voting in elections. And there will be an opportunity to get further involved in one of these of your choice. Well, actually, more than one, but especially one. We'll get to that in just a second, but I want to get a little bit deeper into the three themes. So fossil-free finance is the one that we're most familiar with, that we've worked on before, banking on our future, pension divestment, responsible personal finance, that sort of thing. We are not by any means abandoning that campaign. We're continuing that. Democratizing energy is in large part about a little known but very powerful state agency that each state has, called the Public Utility Commission, or sometimes it goes by a different name in a particular state. But these are, generally speaking, state agencies that are outside of the legislative process. The commissioners are often appointed by the governor or by some other commission themselves. And then they basically have the power, with some oversight, of course, but they basically have the power to set rates, electricity rates, and to do things like decide to build more transmission lines, that sort of thing. They're extremely powerful and little known. And somebody at Central got the bright idea that this would be a good touch point for influence. So as you see there, there's a teach-in on June 14th, which I believe, well, it's evening. I believe it's 6 Eastern, maybe 6:30, but you can find information about that on the website. The next theme is voting in elections, and that is going to be primarily about these three sort of sub-themes: voter registration and turnout. We'll be working with existing organizations and going back to the senior to senior program, election protection, working on voting rights policy advocacy, and poll monitoring, which, if you've never done that, you may want to get involved in this next cycle. It's really interesting and I think very valuable. And then beyond elections, talking about building a culture of democracy, since we seem to have sort of slipped away from that more recently. So let me go back a few slides here. There will be, from each working group, and as Jane Ellen was saying, Third Act Faith is a working group, right? From each working group, there'll be a campaign liaison or two for each of the three campaign clusters. So we hope to field, so to speak, 1 or 2 for democratizing energy, 1 or 2 for fossil-free finance, and 1 or 2 liaisons for what am I leaving out? Voting and elections. Those liaisons will participate in monthly meetings with Central, Melanie, who's on our call, and Deborah and Jeremy. There'll be opportunities for peer learning, and there will be support from Central. The idea is for the liaison to be the bridge, the conduit of information between Central and the working group. And also a big part of the idea is to give other folks in the working group, other than just the core coordinating committee, meaningful work, meaningful places to get involved. So there'll be more about this soon, ways for you to sign up, but just be thinking about that right now. Let me skip ahead here. Okay, so here are the committees that we have in Third Act Faith or that are in the process of organizing. And you see them there: membership, education, and programming. All of those are fairly self-explanatory, I think. We're always open to ideas for new committees, whether standing committees or ad hoc committees. You know, if you want to just put together a committee for a particular action, for instance, that's fine. Or if you think we need an ongoing education committee, that's a standing committee that you can get involved in as well. And here are some more that, well, just a collection.
I'll pick it up there if you want.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, and is that the last slide?
I think it is.
Okay, so I actually added one after you downloaded that. So
Okay.
I'll tell you what we'll do. No, I will just to follow up on what Pat said. We have the 3 new committees that we're trying to populate: membership, just to help integrate folks; education, so that we can know all these great book ideas out to you; and program, to continue these general meetings. So there we also have ongoing committees: communication committee that does social media, emails, and the newsletter, and faithful banking that Dan Terpstra works with to help convey some of the information and opportunities to religious groups and communities. So we welcome you. Our email is right there, thirdactfaith@gmail.com. Love to have you involved with this. Some of the folks on these committees are members of the coordinating committee, but you don't have to be on the coordinating committee. It's a wonderful way for our membership to get involved and get engaged and help provide some leadership. So we will move on. And like I said, Pat, if you want to unshare your screen, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think before I share mine, I'm going to pass it to Melanie. We are so pleased to have Melanie, who is our national campaign coordinator for Third Act. And I think the religious leader yourself. And while I'm getting my slide with some summer opportunities ready to share, she's going to share some information about the Wild Goose Festival that's coming up and Third Act's presence there.
Yeah, thank you, Jane Ellen. Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can do this screen share. I did it. Can you see it?
There you go. Yeah.
All right.
Great.
So I just made this up. I just want to invite you to the best party of the summer. I go to the Wild Goose Festival every year, and it is so hopeful and exciting and energizing and fascinating. And it's a festival of spirit, justice, music, and art. And it's it was about 2,000 folks before the pandemic, but it's down to about 1,000 now. It's very progressive Christians and other spiritually inclined folks. There's a number of Buddhists and some Sufi, and but it's mostly based in progressive Christianity. It'll be July 13th to 16th near Charlotte, North Carolina. It's at a campground, so your registration includes a camping spot, or you can stay in nearby hotels. But on July 13th, which is the festival starts that night, but July 13th, Third Act is presenting a full pre-festival day of climate justice camp. And this is the first time we've done this. They don't usually really emphasize climate much at all at Wild Goose. So when I've been whining about that for a few years, they started saying, well, just bring it on. So then after that, I started working for Third Act. So I'm able to do that. So Bill McKibben's going to be speaking on the main stage, along with author Brian McLaren, if you know him, and some environmental justice speakers. And then we're going to have a special gathering, of course, for Third Actors from both North Carolina Working Group and hopefully Faith Working Group who come down. I know a couple of you all are coming. And so be able to hang out with Bill McKibben a bit. There's going to be amazing workshops. There's so many workshops and events there. Great music every day, all day. You can stay up late for beer and hymns or silent disco. Like I said, you can camp if you want or stay in hotels. The registration is $200 for seniors, But Wild Goose loves us, and they said that they would be willing to pay to give us deep discounts in tickets, or even give a free ticket if that is a hardship for any third actor. And then the climate justice camp is an additional $60. So there's my email there, and the website of the Wild Goose Festival. And I would love to see all of you there. We need help doing oops, I lost you. You're real people. We need help sharing staffing the table to be able to hand out things and invite people to get engaged and that sort of thing. So there we go.
I'm going.
Dan's gonna be
Just
there.
saying.
Yeah, join
I'm
Dan and yeah,
Excited.
anyone in that area would be a great opportunity. Jeff put in the chat, will this be in an upcoming newsletter? It was in the May issue. So if you need all those details, if you didn't catch the dates and the costs and everything, it was in that issue. You can email Melanie, you can email us about it. I am going to see if I can now share. I'm not going to go into presentation mode. I'm just going to leave that slide up. It's got the Wild Goose date in place. Some of you may be familiar with the Chautauqua Institution, those of us in the Northeast. It's a 9-week summer, hard to describe institute, but several of our members have been speakers there. There's a strong religion component, very, again, progressive. I'll be there for 2 weeks, including the week of Wild Goose. But we're hoping to be able to share some information. I'm still contacting them about possibly having a table. And then the Parliament of World Religions is being held in the US this year. It's in Chicago. And I don't know if David is still on the call. I think he said he'd be there. I know many of you will also be attending religious or denominational gatherings, conferences, regional meetings. So we want to make it easy for you to share information about Third Act Faith. We've designed a digital flyer that the coordinating committee will take a look at next week, and then we'll make that widely available. You can print out copies, you can have it on your phone. If you talk to someone who's interested, there's a QR code on it that will take them right to the website, and it's got all of our social media handles. So just as you meet folks this summer who might be interested in the work that we're doing, please tell them about Third Act Faith. Encourage them to sign up or email us for more information. So I think that is all. I'm going to just pull that slide up once again with the Third Act and Third Act. Oh, wait a second. Hit the wrong button there. Opportunities. And I think, I mean, I know we're moving closer to 9 or half hour after. I know you are not all on Eastern time, but any immediate questions for about what we have shared before we do our closing? I'm also happy to stay on the call after the closing song. Anyone else who's available and wants to do that, we can certainly take questions then.
Very careful. I just want to put out there, if I could, I'm planning on going to Goose, driving from the Louisville region. If I could carpool. So if there's anybody for whom that's passing through, or I would be passing through, please let me know.
Great.
Jerry, you want to put your email in the chat?
Good idea. Will do.
I will stop sharing. Sorry.
Okay.
While Jerry is doing that, Mark Rasmussen isn't on this call, but he's been one of our coordinating committee members in the DC area, and they just did some amazing things at 32123. And one of the things he shared with us was a song that they used. It's by Batya Levine, and hopefully the video is going to work so you can see these young folks, these young Jewish singers sharing their passion and their joy. And I thought it would be a good way for us to close, is to see some folks in the generation that is inheriting this you're committed to work with. So go ahead, Pat.
Okay.
The song's called We Rise.
Let's see here. Here we go.
We rise. humbly hearted rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirit to guide us, rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in a hope, in prayer, we're right here, in a hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise, all of the children rise, elders with wisdom rise, ancestors surround us, rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in a hope, in prayer, we're right here, in a hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise, up from the wreckage, rise, with tears and with courage, rise, fighting for life, we rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise, humbly hearted rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirit to guide us, rise.
So friends, go in hope and in peace to do good work. I'm putting the link to that in the chat. There are several folks who are looking for that. Thank you for being with us.